We've managed to make it to another Monster Monday, the best way to start your week. This time around, we're looking at a creature outside my typical purview here, but it's my brother's birthday, and as a manner of celebrating it, I wanted to build one of the monsters he requested, which means that we're checking out the Rumblehorn. Hailing from the movie and television version of the How to Train Your Dragon series, the Rumblehorn is a tracker-class dragon who is best known for its incredible sense of smell. In regards to the development of the creature by character designers of the series, it was apparently inspired by a rhinoceros, a truffle pig, a rainbow dung beetle, a jackhammer, and a battle axe. Most of these are pretty apparent in its design from look alone, aside from perhaps the truffle pig, which is more prominently demonstrated by its incredible sense of smell. One of these dragons ends up becoming Stoic's personal mount over the course of the series, and is noted to be a surprisingly caring guardian, who seeks to protect others from danger. With all that established, my initial build of this creature was looking a little basic, so I did take a second pass and spruced it up just a bit with some creative liberties. More mechanically, I haven't really built any dragons from this series, so it was a little hard for me to gauge levels, which led to me relying on my brother's suggestion for a level 8 creature. I went with the dragon trait, and that alone, as I don't think its element is tied so deeply into it that it warrants the inclusion among its traits. Alright, delving into the details of our daunting dragon dreadnought, the Rumblehorn uses an extreme strength, so that it can better bash and batter through anything in its way, while its constitution follows at a high value. Within Pathfinder, dragons tend to skew a bit more towards the higher numbers, as one of its iconic creatures, and I did lean into that just a tiny bit here. I kept with a moderate dexterity and wisdom, and I was actually tempted to go a little higher with them, but I held myself back. You could also argue that the intelligence of this creature should be higher, but I think setting it just above the minimum of a beast works out for it. Now, despite that moderate wisdom, I did design it with an extreme perception bonus, that is further enhanced by both dark vision and an immense scent range. This is all based on the vaunted olfactory abilities of the Rumblehorn, that did make me almost consider giving it a precise sense of smell. But I settled on combining this with a high survival skill, aiding it in tracking. It also has a high athletic skill based on its physicality, but perhaps a bit more surprising is the inclusion of stealth and acrobatics in its kit. The former uses a moderate value, and is inspired by its apparent ability to hide itself quite capably in the foliage, taking advantage of its verdant hide. That leaves its acrobatics at low, which I at least wanted to include for the sake of the Rumblehorn's flight capabilities, which it does do quite well from what we've seen in the show. I feel like I've been making monsters with complicated defenses lately, but the Rumblehorn is a little bit more basic, a return to my roots. As a bit of a brute, it has a moderate armor class, which fits with the general vastness of this big burly dragon. Following that value, I decided to design it with a high pool of hit points, while featuring some classic dragon immunities to paralyze and sleep, while also having a minor resistance to fire damage. This kind of feels like something it should have, but I'm not 100% on it, and I think it's low enough that you could remove it without really requiring any adjustments for it. However, given these immunities and resistance along with its HP, I decided to give it a high fortitude bonus, but a low reflex and will save, which coincidentally matches the way its ability scores are rated. I did that unintentionally this time around, but I think it all fits together. Now, from my understanding, the primary means of attack for the Rumblehorn is its eponymous horn and its club-like tail. Both of these strikes use a moderate attack bonus, and both of them actually deal the same amount of damage as well at a high value. With both of them sharing these numbers, that left me to using traits to actually really differentiate them. So, its horn is rather simple with just the Fatal D12 trait. This is a straightforward but potent trait that gives it a real nasty smack if it manages to land a crit. Whereas its spiny tail features reach, sweep, and versatile piercing based on the spikes lining it. Again, nothing too crazy here, it's a pretty basic setup, but it is handy and I think it works quite nicely for our rowdy, raucous Rumblehorn. At the core of this monster are two abilities, and they're honestly pretty straightforward. The first of them is Fire Barrage, which is its AoE breath weapon. But the Rumblehorn doesn't breathe cones or lines of fire. Instead, it launches exploding missiles of flame, which is represented by a 15-foot burst with a range of 120 feet. This deals limited use area damage at a high DC, and doesn't really have much going on beyond that. It is seen using these in quick succession within the show, so I made the area a little bigger at the cost of putting a cooldown on it in the first place. The other central ability of the Rumblehorn is its powerful charge. While not a universal monster ability that features rules in the back of the book or anything, this is a fairly standardized effect that can be found on a range of creatures, including the Minotaur. The Rumblehorn does something a little different with it from what I've seen, by adding the caveat that it can fly as part of this rather than being limited to striding. I had the damage increase on the charge to be extreme, without actually changing the damage dice, so that way it could still make the most out of its fatal trait. Among its other abilities, we have Draconic Frenzy, which is seen on a range of drakes and true dragons, Trample, with a high DC and a damage based on its horn, and then we get something a little bit more interesting in the form of Capsize. This is another ability seen on a few creatures, such as the Sea Serpent and Hippopotamus, and I reference the latter for transplanting it into the Rumblehorn with a slight adjustment for numbers. I did base the inclusion of this ability on the Rumblehorn crashing through ships with enough force to sink them, which is kind of in reverse of how Capsize is usually supposed to go, but I think it's good. I think it all works out. Now the Rumblehorn does have a unique reaction in the form of its twisting tail, which again isn't exactly unique, and can be found on a number of drakes and dragons, but is a pretty brutal effect. The lockdown it inflicts through this whole disrupting movement on just a regular hit feels like it could get pretty nasty. But I've seen it on creatures of lower level than the Rumblehorn itself, so I'm inclined to include it as is. That leaves us with a single ability to discuss, and this may perhaps be the most unique feature of the Rumblehorn. Inspired by the way that the Rumblehorn will fly through its own fire to burn off its scent, Blinding Flash allows the Rumblehorn to unleash a blast that is a bit more flash than bang. It isn't quite enough to stun or blind foes, but the Rumblehorn is able to use it for cover and briefly hide itself to leave the next victim of its attack off guard. This is a particularly nifty combo with its powerful charge, and is a great way for it to say hello at the start of an encounter. With all that covered, we're about done with this durable dragon. A towering titan, this terrific tracker tends to tangle with targets through trampling tosses and terrain-tearing trundling, totaling even trumpeting terrors with temerity. Something that I couldn't quite figure out a way to properly work into its kit is the fact that the Rumblehorn is smart enough to use the terrain to its advantage. For example, it will knock down pillars to flatten foes or create advantageous terrain for itself. And I actually think that is better designed as a feature of the environment that you run it in, rather than for the creature itself. For some other encounter ideas, you could obviously include it with a rider, which is explored plenty in the series that it hails from. Let me know what you think of this creature and what other sorts of monsters you'd like to see in a comment. If you like what you see here and want more, be sure to leave a like and then subscribe to the channel. You can also check out the blog, which is linked below along with the Twitter and Discord. Thanks for watching, have a monstrous Monday, and a happy birthday to my little brother.
Look, it's Peppy, my favourite pet yak! We didn't eat you on Snuggle Tug Morning after all. No.